everyone, and welcome to the Burgess podcast, the show where we are opening up conversations about life at sea, discussing hot topics within the industry, as well as offering mental health support and promoting well-being for crew. We also have our very own in-house recruitment team, so if you or anyone you know is currently looking for a new position, please send your updated CV to recruitment@burgessyachts.com or check out our recruitment posts on Instagram @Burgess Yacht Crew. Hi everyone, we're back today with the Burgess Blue Ocean team, and today we're going to be talking to Alex and Michela about the impact of anchoring on our ocean seabeds. So just to give you a little background, seagrass evolved around 100 million years ago, amazing, and can form dense underwater meadows, some of which are large enough to see from space. Although they receive little attention, they are the most productive ecosystems in the world. And whether we are aware of it or not, every time we drop anchor, we are affecting these fragile marine habitats. So we're not going to solve everything today, but what we want to do is raise awareness and start a conversation about what each of us can do to help. So one example of these underwater meadows is one called Posidonia oceanica, apparently a key protected habitat in the Mediterranean Sea. So I've never heard of it before, which is shameful. But Michela, could you tell us a little bit more about it?
So Posidonia is a species of seagrass, and it grows in the Mediterranean at depths of up to about 30 to 40 meters, which is why it's so vulnerable to anchoring, because it's all along the shoreline. So the main reason why it's so vulnerable is that it grows at a speed of 1 centimeters per 100 years. So once it's damaged, it just cannot possibly recover. It looks extremely uninteresting. It literally just looks like grass, but it's the most amazing organism. So it is extremely important for so many reasons, for as an ecosystem, for as a nursery for a lot of different species of marine creatures, not just in the Mediterranean, but in many areas of coastline all around the world. But the reason why it's so very important on a global scale is that despite the fact that it only covers 0.1 or 0.2% of the ocean surface, seagrass meadows actually account for more than 10% of the total ocean carbon storage. So we know that, the ocean is a huge carbon sink. 10% of that is due to seagrass meadows. So that's why they're so important to preserve. And one of the other aspects that is so important is that because it is a seagrass, and so it has roots, big roots under the seabed, it stabilizes the seabed and the sediments, and so it prevents coastal erosion, and it also filters the water, because as it stabilizes the sediments, it stabilizes marine pollutants, it stabilizes heavy metals and excess nutrients that might come from effluents, from rivers, etc. And so it keeps the water cleaner. So it's, for all of these reasons, it's got a huge economic value as well, which is almost immeasurable.
So important, isn't it? And I read somewhere that it soaks up more carbon dioxide every year than a similar sized piece of the Amazon rainforest. Is that right?
Yes. It holds twice as much carbon dioxide per hectare as a tropical rainforest. So it's absolutely incredible. It really is. And there's many more facts and things, and obviously we can't go through them all now, but it's just to sort of give people an idea of quite how incredible and incredibly important it is to preserve seagrass meadows.
Yeah, and I guess it's one of those unseen habitats. You don't see it, so you kind of probably very easy to forget about it, to forget it's there, and to forget that, when you're dropping anchor, that the damage that's being caused. Now, I understand that there's some strict regulations about anchoring along the French Mediterranean coastline. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, that's right. I mean, most people in yachting will know about this. There are some very stringent restrictions that came into force last summer season, and pretty much all along the French Mediterranean coastline and off the coast of Corsica, it is strictly prohibited to anchor on the Posidonia meadows. So at depths of, up to 30 meters. 40 meters in Corsica, it's prohibited to anchor, and there are very stringent, very significant sanctions, up to potentially 3 years in prison for the captain, fines of up to €150,000, and potentially the ban on navigating in French territorial waters for the vessel. So governments are taking this very seriously. Obviously, the French government has decided to go down this route of implementing these very, very strict regulations. It doesn't mean that this is limited to the French coastline. In Spain, especially the Balearics, the issue is very much the same. They have chosen the route of sort of education, and they're trying to install eco moorings and sort of mooring fields to prevent the anchors from damaging the seabed. But Posidonia is along the coastline, as we said, of everywhere in the Mediterranean Sea, and the issue is very much the same everywhere.
So, Alex, how do crew find out about these protected areas?
Well, I mean, first off, I'd like to say I'm slightly embarrassed at my lack of understanding and knowledge of seagrass. When I started, it wasn't quite so relevant in some ways, which has perhaps led to some of the destruction of the seagrass. So, Michela, thank you for some of that information, because it was a bit of a fact learning for me. And again, embarrassed to say that I've probably caused a bit of damage in the past. But I mean, now you can see that there is some information on local charts that guide you or highlight areas, perhaps larger areas of seagrass. There are certainly local ship agents. They would know because they'd have the local information to hand. And I'd always be in contact. Nowadays, you normally engage in a ship agent when you're entering an area or a country. So it would be prudent to find out where you can and can't go, mainly because of wanting nice anchorages for your guests. But it should be made aware, and part of the reason for this podcast, I'm sure, and other information that's sort of being handed out is to draw the attention, and therefore crew can see, well, when we are arriving in an anchorage, not only do we have to have our pre-arrival checks and making sure that where we're going and what we're doing is safe and the right weather conditions and the right depth, etc., but at the top of that list should be the seabed and the grass and any protected areas. Now, for sure, you can see that there are areas that are cut off, areas that are highlighted as no-go zones. But I didn't realize that it's all along the coastline and it's everywhere. And obviously they can't corner off bigger sections. So even if you're going to a bay that allows anchoring, you have to be very, very mindful. So I think you just have to do your absolute best to research and pay special care as to where you're going. So I think there are apps. I think there are dedicated websites, ship agents, as I've mentioned, some chart information. There's plenty of resources. There's plenty of areas to find this information out. But I'm not going to lie, it's certainly something in the past that I perhaps didn't pay as much attention as I should have.
Well, I think I mentioned earlier, I'd never even heard of Posidonia oceanica. So I think we're all in that learning stage when it comes to environmental issues and sustainability issues, because it is such a massive topic, isn't it? So I think the reasons for these podcasts are just to start talking and having these conversations about what the issues are. And again, finding that balance between following the rules and, how much better we can do. What can we do to improve our impact on those environments?
Exactly. Yeah, I think so. It's just making people aware. And there's so many, moving parts and people involved in trying to make an overall difference. I think Michela alluded to it before, mooring buoy fields. That's a good resolution, a good answer, but it comes with a cost. You're weighing up the balance of trying to satisfy your clients or guests' wishes. They want to be at a nice spot, somewhere nice to swim, it's protected, it looks beautiful. But then be mindful of the seagrass, the island or the country or wherever you're visiting. They want the tourism, they want to bring in the money, etc. So if everybody played a part, like anything, like all the recycling and etc., it would be a massive improvement. But that's going to be some time off. So it's just making smaller changes, and we can start with us in the office, but also the crew on board, and just having that mindfulness and putting that priority at the top of the pre-arrival checklist, as I said before.
Yeah, baby steps. It's all about baby steps, isn't it? As long as we're all, making those steps in the right direction. We're going to talk about solutions in a minute, but I think one of the things that we've talked about previously is obviously passage planning would be key to the yachts, knowing where they're going, knowing where these places are in advance. And I think we've talked earlier about the app. Because obviously this information is not, I was surprised to hear that it's not included in the charts, in the ECDIS charts that the yachts have. So it's like, where can they easily find this information? And we talked briefly about, is it the Donia app?
I believe so, yeah. And that obviously provides an amazing amount of information. And unless, again, as me being ignorant, I don't think it's been around that long, because it's something I never really used that much when I was on board. And you're right, charts probably don't contain a huge amount of information because they're designed for, most of them designed for commercial shipping, and they wouldn't give a huge amount of information on a local little anchorage. So I think, again, it's probably falls onto the crew members to be very proactive, either using the Donia app or local knowledge. Google seems to be solving most answers these days. And, you can see when you're coming to anchor, you can see, generally speaking, if you're in shallower waters, you can actually see what you're anchoring on. So, yeah, I think it requires crew to be proactive in finding out where they're going.
Yeah. And we mentioned briefly earlier about obviously guests' preferences, which is obviously critical, for the crew when navigating the yacht. But is it something that we can add to the brief that's given to the guests, before they set off, to discuss these areas and areas that would they mind avoiding?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, that people are very mindful of it, and so guests equally so. They're not going to be, or they don't want to be part of something that's destroying the environment. I mean, there was an incident in Formentera several years ago where a yacht did cause some quite significant damage to seagrass, and the press were on it, and they took photographs of the boat and of the area and the people on board, etc., etc. So it doesn't look good for anybody. And I think if you explain, we can't go here, we would like to go here, but we'll try our best to go here, or provide other options, etc., then I'm sure they'll be fully understanding. If a bay is shut off, I mean, if it's, you're not allowed to go there, then no one else will be there, which will help in persuading them to say, look, this isn't the best place to go. Or you can say, look, we'll anchor around the corner and we'll tender you in, and you can swim off the tender, or provide options. I think that's the thing you've got to do, rather than just saying no. But it's the pressure. I mean, of course, and if there's no regulation, if you can go into that bay, then you have to go in with a mindful approach and say, right, we're going to anchor in this little corner here, and explain why you're down there and not bang in the middle of the bay.
Yeah, like you said, offering options has got to be, the way forward. But obviously, like you said, that does take time, and it relies on the crew doing all the research. So I guess the more information that we can give crew, then the easier it is for them to access.
Yeah, for sure. And we've got crew have so much to do anyway. So if there's something that's at your fingertips, then yeah, that would be ideal.
And I think, like with most things, sustainability, it's the research that goes into it. You buying something that you think covers all the angles. I think that in one of our next podcasts, we're going to be talking about sunscreen, and you think sunscreen's okay because it comes from a reputable shop, but actually, you have to do the research. It relies on you. So let's talk sustainable anchoring practices. What are they? What do crew need to look at?
Well, I mean, good question. That's quite a varied topic, and I won't sit here and talk about the best way to practice or what you should do when you're anchoring, because that will probably be annoying for a lot of people to listen to. But also, it's each anchorage is completely different, and you'll relocate to an anchorage at a moment's notice and explore areas that you're not so familiar with. And it may be a busy anchorage and maybe a deeper anchorage, etc. So many factors into anchoring. But I think, considering sort of a few topics, I mean, ideally, and it does exist in some parts of the Med and around the world, the local authorities, to put a bit of pressure back on them, would be great if they can introduce mooring buoys or mooring fields. I think, Michela, you alluded to it a while ago, where they're fully aware that it's going to be a popular spot. And if you introduce a buoy in which you can tie up to, albeit at a cost, You can still be in that nice anchorage, still be in that beautiful bay, and know that you're not causing any damage. So ultimately, if we have some input from the local authorities, then they can carefully remove or say, okay, well, we accept the fact that it's busy bay, so we will put some mooring buoys in place. We will destroy a little bit of the seagrass knowingly, but that will be it. And the rest of the seagrass we know will be able to live forever and not be worried about anchors destroying them. But that, again, there's a lot of cost for them to do. So in the interim, as we spoke about before, I think it's probably knowing where you're going to anchor and being familiar with what might be down there already would be advantageous. But if you're going to a bay and you're not sure, then knowing the depth in which the seagrass are at, if you can anchor a little bit further out into slightly deeper water, or alternatively slightly shallower if it doesn't grow in the shallower depth. But if you are anchored in a position, you've only got limited choice, you can be very sort of careful about how you're dropping the anchor out, or indeed if you're aware that you've got quite a bit of windage on the yacht and the yacht's likely to snake around quite a bit, that causes a lot of damage. The chain, the catenna on the chain just plows the field, if you like, and pulls a lot of seagrass. So you can think, right, okay, well, it's going to be a bit windy here. We're going to be dropping one anchor. We could be swinging around quite a lot. Maybe we put two anchors out so the boat doesn't move quite as much. I don't know. Maybe that could be doubling the effect and making things worse. But I suppose you always kind of, okay, what can we do that might preserve or do at least damage, recovering the anchor, making sure. I mean, these are all basic anchoring procedures anyway, but picking up the anchor, you are making sure that there's no weight on the anchor and it's coming up vertically and put off the seabed without, again, dragging it through the seagrass, etc. So yeah, it's, I suppose, a case of simple and the usual best anchoring practices will also preserve potentially seagrass if you're not rushing and doing things carelessly. But again, it's hard. Pressure, guest demands, unfamiliarity of a certain area, it makes it difficult.
The one thing I would say is that, unfortunately, at this moment in time, we are raising awareness of the issue, and it is significant. And of course, the French government has decided to put these restrictions in place that seem to be working, because there seems to have been less damage in the past summer season as the previous ones, despite some infractions to the regulations. So the regulations are working. But then at the same time, there are no buoys out there for large yachts. Yes, some local ports and local areas are installing mooring fields, but they're all for very small boats. The same in the Balearics. So at this moment in time, unfortunately, yes, we are aware of the problem. And yes, there are these restrictions that would need to be adhered to, but there are no actual solutions in terms of, potentially satisfying the guest demands and anchoring in a sustainable way, because the mooring buoys are just not there yet. I believe that there are investments and business potential in that area, and I'm sure they will come. But at this moment in time, the two things are not just quite aligned yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that's what we need, really, isn't it? You need the government interventions to support the crew in making, helping them to make these decisions as to where they drop anchor and where they can and can't, and give the information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, just to finish up, I think it'd be good just to go back to the topic of seagrass. And obviously, as a fragile habitat, it is under threat at the moment, but it's not all from anchoring. Am I right?
It's not just anchoring, of course. It is certainly true that human activity is the main threat to seagrass, but obviously anchoring is just one minor element of that. Of course, in certain areas, it is like the south of France. It is a very significant threat in that specific area. But, globally, of course, there's many, many other factors that affect seagrass, and, we certainly cannot address them all here. But just as another fact, to give a better idea of quite how significant this threat is, so over 20% of the seagrass meadows have already been lost over the past 200 years. And in the Med, this is closer to 30%. And each year, 1.5% is still being lost. And of course, we talked about quite how important seagrass is to it's so many different aspects of
life. All of us, it's marine life, and it supports us as well, doesn't it, us as humans? And I think, like we said earlier, it's an unseen, you don't see it, so it's very hard to make any connection with it, because it's something that hides under the water and you don't really think about it, do you?
And it doesn't look, maybe some would say it doesn't look particularly pretty. It's not like coral, and yet is, just as important. Look at it and you don't think much of it. Raise the anchor, there's all these green blades of grass, and you just think, oh well, that needs to be washed off, and that's all you worry about. But that is a huge damage that has been done, and it just won't recover.
Yeah. And we just need to, just having these conversations is a good step forward, because, it's raising awareness that this muck that we're dredging up off the bottom of the oceans is a massive ecosystem that sustains marine wildlife as well as us as humans. So I think, I've mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, we're fully aware that this is another environmental topic that, we're all being asked to look at. We accept that no conversation is going to solve all problems in one hit, but, let's start these conversations. Let's work together as a community to discuss ideas, areas that you're aware of that are protected or that are moving towards protection, areas that you think need to be avoided. Let's work together. You guys are all on the yachts dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. Get in touch with us at Burgess Yacht Crew and give us your feedback.